All right, welcome to today's episode of Firefighting Fridays. I'm Jeff Diederich with Strategic Fire Training, and we have Jeff Shupe, Jerry Knapp, Chad Gruver, and Micah Hydeman joining us tonight. We're gonna get into engine work tonight, but before we start, I just want to make mention and send thoughts and prayers to our brothers and sisters at the St. Louis Fire Department. They had a tragedy there today, and we're thinking about you folks, and best wishes to you and your families there. Okay, so onto the show here. We're talking about we've covered a lot in the last several episodes, but what we really haven't touched on was stretching, the basic art form of engine work, and that's getting the tailboard firefighters off the engine and at the room of origin. So we're going to hit that today in some different scenarios, and we're going to lean on Jeff and Jerry and Chad, Micah, and myself. We're going to kind of talk about some experience-based lessons there and how we can help you guys get from the tailboard to the fire as efficiently as possible. So to start things out, let's go to Jeff Shupe. Jeff, can you talk to us about the basics, the start? Where do we start when it comes to a good stretch?
It starts with having an engine that's a war wagon, or at least a triple combination apparatus. And I think this is a problem I think has gotten or manifested itself in many fire departments over the last 10 to 15 years, where when they go out and they buy an engine, they specify anything but a triple combination engine. And it's like the fire departments locally are forgetting what the engine is actually for. Another thing that's having an impact on the decision making on how engines are designed and so forth is the sales representatives who come in there and try to sell fire departments more than what they need or something other than what they need. You know, and I see it happening in fire departments of all sizes, whether they're small fire departments or big metropolitan fire departments. Some of the designs of these new engines out there is just unbelievable. It's like, how do you get anything going, or how do you have any smooth operation with hose stretching and then pumping and so forth at fires with the way some of these engines are set up? And then the other thing is, you know, how the hose beds are laid out and so forth. You know, as we were talking before, that many engines today have on their hose beds high side cabinets on both sides. And once in a while you see an overhead ladder rack. Sometimes you don't. And sometimes in some departments, the administrative people who are really responsible for the specifications of their apparatus are allowing things like ladders to be put in a compartment in a hose bed. So look what that does to your capabilities and your functions of your hose loads, especially out the rear of the apparatus and so forth. You're narrowing the amount of hose you can carry. You're putting this ladder box in there. And in some cases, it's cutting down on the amount of hose you might need. And it's kind of funny. It's kind of also hypocritical. Some of these fire departments are doing this, and yet they're saying, well, we need more hose. We need more hose. Well, then don't specify an engine like that. Put your ladders back in the side of the engine or put them up on an overhead ladder rack. But don't put ladders, ground ladders, in a box in your hose beds, because that's just ruining your capabilities and capacities for your hose beds. And the other thing too is, so we all see them, is a hose load that's 10 feet up in the air. It takes 3 or 4 or 5 steps to get on, to get up there and get the hose if you're stretching from the rear of your apparatus. A lot of departments, you know, they say, well, we have our supply lines and we have our 2.5 that come out the rear, and our 1 3/4 comes out through cross lays and so forth. Okay. All right, so there's another thing that departments need to consider. If you're having your bigger hose lines come out the rear of the apparatus, how much do you have? And what accessibility do you have? Is it 5-inch? Is it 4-inch? Is it 2.5? If it's a cross lay, a lot of departments fall back on NFPA standards only. Oh, NFPA says we only need 400 feet of 1.5-inch or larger hose in our hose storage areas of our cross lays that are 3.5 cubic foot of area or larger. Well, that's pretty limiting if you think about it. So, I think if you're going to talk about being able to make good, efficient, quick stretches at the scene of a fire in your community, you got to look at your engines and design them to be fire engines, war wagons, not something other than and so forth.
And
So,
if I could even further go past that, is those engines should be designed for how you're set up to operate in the town that you're operating in, the first do you're operating. I mean, it makes sense just saying that, but you would be surprised if you get out and look around
yeah.
and you see engines that are not set up for firefighting whatsoever. They're set up for maybe hauling water and doing a relay operation, but they have no intent of actually doing pulling line to offensively fight a fire. So these things are real and they're out there. The one thing that is very prevalent out there is the pre-connect line. We see it all over across the United States. There are some departments like Cleveland and a few others that have no pre-connected hand lines on their engines. Still very successful and very quick to get water on fire. But the pre-connect is here to stay because, well, it works in a lot of places. And Jerry, can you give us a little bit on the pre-connect by you guys?
Sure, Jeff. We have pre-connected cross lays on all of our engines. There's two 200-foot pre-connects, which serves us really well for the residential areas where the house is close to the street and obviously less than a 200-foot stretch. We have dead beds in the rear, and we have made Jeff brought up a great point that hose load has got to be low. The guy's got to be able to reach that hose from the ground, preferably, so you can get it out quickly. So we have that mix of the flat load or the static loads in the rear and the pre-connects in the cross lays, and it really works great. We're seeing a lot of that. Jeff talked about engine design. There's an engineer me in a nearby department. It's a fully hydranted district. They have 1,000-gallon water tank, which is great, except you can't get the pre-connects off and you can't get the flat load off because it's just too high. I'm 5'9", so I'm kind of a little bit smaller than most guys, but I can barely reach the static load in the back.
5'9".
Yeah, if I stand up real straight.
Okay.
So, and the pre-connects, you have to have three hands because you have to get up on a running board near the pump panel. You have to hold on with one hand, and you get another hand to get the nozzle, and then you need a third hand to get the bundle of hose to go with you. So it's just impossible. So that's kind of where we're at.
We see that same kind of thing by us, where engines are designed with a very minimal tailboard because, like Jeff was saying earlier, everything has been considered for cabinet space, and you end up with full cabinets that actually extend back into where a tailboard would be, and then the tailboard is just not only narrow, but it's also very small, and it's tough to get lines off the back top because you have to step up on something. But now the tailboards are even shrinking. It's a poor design when it comes to using the truck what it was supposed to be designed to do, which was get lines off and get water on fire. So
I think it's important too. If you're sitting at the kitchen table drinking a cup of coffee, designing an engine, think about that thing's going to be used at night, when visibility's down in icy conditions. So what do you want your guys doing? You don't want them jumping around like you're saying, Jeff. You want them, you want to be able to grab the line and get out.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Diederich, talking about speccing out a war wagon, I've only got to do one spec on my engine, and we're getting ready to do another one. I started talking to the vendors. They will do anything you ask them to do, but you have to realize that whatever you ask for, they can give it to you, but they're going to take something away. Shupe was talking about the ladder box. Ladder box takes away from your hose bed. How big of a tank you've got, that takes away from hose bed. I do have 1,000-gallon tank, and my engine's pretty manageable. The ladder box, it doesn't keep the ladders any cleaner, and they're hard to get out. And if the engine needs to use a ladder, I'd rather have them on the side. So that's going to be the big change that we do with the next engine, is try to put them on the side where we can get to them quick if we need to. But these vendors, the dealers, they'll do anything. You just have to be willing to give up. What are you giving up? And that's where I think Shupe hit it on the head. Your priority needs to be, we need to get water out of this thing as fast as possible, then worry about everything else.
Yeah, right. Well, when it comes to the pre-connect, we've seen all kinds of different types. We've seen midship, we've seen pre-connects off the back, we've seen bumpers pre-plumbed, and there's goods and bads about all three of them. Just before we move on from pre-connects, can you guys give us a little your experience of how the pre-connect is, or how was the pre-connect at a company you worked at? Have you guys worked off the bumper with the pre-connect? Have you worked off the back with the pre-connect? And what was your vibe or your success on that? Jeff, I'm sorry, I got to cut you out of this one, buddy. I know.
I know, right? Yeah.
Micah?
Yeah, so my former department, they were a pretty strong pre-connect cross-lay department. It wasn't until the last probably 5 or 7 years they really started scratching their heads and thought about stretching from the rear off the bumper with the pre-connects. Now it's foreign to some departments. Like I said, my former department is a different culture. The fire demographics was a little different in the areas of the city. And to where the department I'm at today, I was just on the pumper yesterday and meeting guys who I haven't worked with. They said, hey, when we pull up to a structure fire, we pull pass if we can with the pumper and we stretch from the rear. Is that okay with you? I said, that sounds great, man. You're in my wheelhouse. So I think it's just a matter of some people are uncomfortable stretching with the cross lay. Maybe in departments, I wouldn't say new, but just maybe with the concept of they got the rig and that's all they've done, versus some departments who've been around the block a time or two and they've found out stretching from the rear has been successful. I'm working on 2 different worlds.
Right. Yeah, I've seen around where I work where the pre-connect is hailed as the go-to. My department, we try to pull past and we work off the back, and that makes sense for us because we leave the front of the building open for whether it's the truck or the command staff or whoever else needs to be there, because we can make the hose as long as we want. It's easy. And we take that working length with us and then we just get to it. So as far as if we can get to working off the back, Shupe, what's some of the A, B, and C's of that? I mean, we know why we want to work off the back, but as a tailboard firefighter, what's some of the concepts that you got to have in your head as you're doing that?
Well, let me ask you, are you working with a pre-connected line off the rear or a static bed?
I would think that most departments, if they're trying to get into working off the bed and they haven't in the past, they're probably going to start with loading a 300 or 400 foot piece of hose pre-connected in the back. So let's just start with that.
Okay. Number 2, is your engine plumbed to have a rear outlet?
Again, that's another, like you were talking, the design is all about it. So even
Exactly
if it's
right.
not plumbed to the back, though, we have options, right? We could take it right to the discharge of the pump panel.
Right. Where I come from, there are 3 Ys on the engine: officer side, driver side, and the rear. There are no pre-connected lines, and that's how it's operated from. And we run, and there's no cross lays either, by the way. Everybody comes out the bed. You got 2 big beds of 1 3/4. You might have a cross laid bed of 2 inch behind the cab, but it's a dead load. It's oh gosh, maybe 300 or 350 feet of 2 inch hose, and that's it. So the thing is, when you load your hose beds for your attack hose, I think practically every engine citywide has the one bed as its primary attack line, which means it's set up in the last 50 feet that's packed away. It's packed in loops of about 6 or 7 feet long, then the nozzle laid on top of it, and that's it. You got the working length right there with the nozzle. And so the nozzle, the guy on the nozzle, he's the one who comes up, puts his arm through the loops or throws it on his shoulder. Or, I don't care what he does or how he does it. It's just got to get that 50 feet with the nozzle to the drop point. And what you want is to get all the hose, all your attack hose, to the fire or to the access area. And you want to keep your hose going in a straight line. Again, in our part of the country, northern United States, we're dealing with snow. You don't even see the hose once it drops below. You got 6 or 8 inches of snow in the yard. And here, once that hose is dropped, and the next guy grabs the second coupling, he might not even see that hose, but he sees that the nozzle, the guy in the nozzle's got his working length with it. And this is how critical it is that each person does their part of the job. So as that line goes in a straight line to the drop site, that's going to be done. And if we're working with 3 people on an engine, which many departments do, second person takes a second coupling and goes and can pull up a little bit extra hose. Again, what kind of a building are you going into? Are you going into a house? Are you going into an apartment building, a commercial building, going into a warehouse? All this is how much hose and what size hose that's coming out of the rear of the engine. You want a nice smooth stretch, whether it's going that way, or if you've got to come around the engine, do a 180. So these are all things that you want to set up your engine to be able to do quickly, easily with the personnel that you have on that engine. So you're muted, Jeff. You're muted.
My apologies. So when it comes to trying to teach stretching, what gets lost is when you're stretching in on a drill ground, it's much different than on a fire ground, because you're trying to express where that drop point is, which is where you're going to put your mask on and go on air before you make the building or make the room. And the idea here is you need to make sure that the hose is flaked out to the drop point, and then it's filled, flowed, ready to go. But if that fire is far away from the drop point, that being maybe it's the fire on the 3rd floor of that house, or further into that commercial building, that second person coming with the second coupling needs to bring it all the way to the drop point, so that we have 100 feet of hose at that drop point, but it's not tangled up and it's not looped up to where it's going to kink once it's filled. So that's what I love about the simplicity of our system here, is where it's always the same. That nozzleman has his 50 feet, takes it to the drop point. Second person, second coupling. If it's a small area, don't need to bring the coupling all the way to the drop point. That's something that's a judgment call. But if it looks like a second or third floor, or a second floor with an attic, yeah, bring that second coupling up. And then when you're called for water, the engine operator just pulls to the next coupling, breaks it, and connects it. I mean, it's just so simple that it's hard to imagine that it's actually, that's how it works.
It scares people. Simplicity scares people, because again, take a look at what's happened in the American Fire Service in the last generation or so that's come on the job. There are people who think you got to get into a wrestling match to put a hose line in service, and they think you got to wrestle with it, you got to pull, you got to run, you got to breathe hard, and all this other stuff. And what we're doing is showing people simplicity, and we're also minimizing the weight of the hose, especially what the nozzle firefighters got with them. You got the nozzle here, you got 50 feet of hose on your arm or your shoulder. I don't care, but you're walking and you don't have to run. It's like when Bobby Presto and I used to do the Senior Man Show, we would always say, walk with a sense of purpose. There's no need to run, okay? You fall and break your nose, twist the knee, break an ankle or something like that because you're running and you slipped or you tripped or something else happened, you're no good to anybody, and you're not going to have any fun after that. So just think about it,
Yeah. I don't think it's taught very much anymore. I know I didn't learn the static bed in the academy, and I think everybody's afraid of the unknown. We get to see these kids and the people that we teach, and they've never seen it before. And I always point out, y'all been using static your whole career, you just don't realize it. Most people's LDH hose is a static load, and they never mess up the static load. It always flakes out. But, I started learning this from you when I started rolling with you guys, and it really is the simplest. Like you said, it's so simple, it scares people.
Yeah.
I really don't think it's taught anymore. Jerry, is it taught up in your area?
We have a New York City influence, so to some degree it is. But pre-connects, I think you guys are onto an important point. Pre-connects seem like they're smarter, faster, easier. And I guess they are as long as they work. But if the hose is too short,
It
I
depends.
always,
It depends on your pre-connect. I've seen triple loads tied in knots.
oh yeah, absolutely. I was doing engine company classes a couple of years ago at the training center, and anyway, make a long story short, I said to the partner, "Hey, show me how you stretch that pre-connect," and it was a cross lay with a top mounted pump panel in that. I forget what you even call it. It's in a tray, you know. So they went to stretch it and couldn't get it out because the swivel fitting pinched down on the hose when they pulled it out. They literally could not get the hose out of the truck off the engine there. So the chief goes, "Oh, this is a real fire. We just pull a different line." So I'm like, "Okay, go ahead and do that." So they tried to pull a second one. They couldn't get the second one off the hose bed. And these are the guys who were all disappointed because they were coming for live fire, you know. I'm like, dudes, you need to go live water first before you do live fire, you know. But it's you know, simple work. So I'm with you guys, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the interesting hose engines I saw, which made a lot of sense to me, and I saw one like it back here in Ohio. Jerry, we were out at FDIC West in LA years ago. Remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I saw one of their engines and I took pictures of it because it had the LDH and the 2.5 out the back. And then the 2.5, they had a big hose bed of 2.5. And it was all static, flat loaded and so forth. And I walked around to the pump panel. And instead of having two narrow crosslays with limited amounts of hose, and that's what you did get if you let a manufacturer say, "Oh yeah, we'll set up these crosslay pre-connected hose beds for you." Yeah, you get a limited amount, and you guys have seen it where we can barely get 200 feet in there when the couplings are rubbing up against each other or catching on each other. But anyways, this LA City engine, I looked at that son of a gun. 3 hose beds across the top of the pump panel, and each one of them had to be about that wide, 4 to 5 widths wide. And there was the next one, same thing, 4 to 5 widths of the hose wide. And there was the third one. And then of course they had their outlets on each side of the engine where they could pull off what they wanted, break it, hook it into the outlet, boom, just like we preach, only we use Ys. We preach the thing about Ys on each side of the engine and out the rear. But it was just like so simple. They had that design, and my God, that was 2005. I think we were out there then. So there's different looks. I mean, if you know, not saying you have to copy anybody's fire department, but doggone, there's different looks to achieve that simplicity of hose bed design. Okay.
Yeah.
So
So that's our, bread and butter. Get the 1.75" off the engine, get the line filled up, flow it, run it, get it in there and put the fire out. When it comes to like maybe a larger fire, whether it's a commercial building or maybe just a McMansion, let's say, or you need to get a lot of water going off. What's the tailboard firefighter thinking there? Like, at what point are you as a firefighter arriving at a large fire? What are you thinking about a stretch there?
Jerry?
I think you're thinking about a couple things. I know we preached using the RAM, especially in a low manpower situation where you've got a church or a large industrial fire where you need a large amount of water. The back, one of our flat or static loads in the back has a RAM on it. So, we'll pull that. So if you need that kind of water, that's the thought. Obviously, if it's a commercial, industrial, whatever, it's not a residential, we're thinking 2.5 and the 2.5. That's how we train our guys. So residential 1.75" fine, away it goes. But anything beyond that is 2.5 or larger.
One of the questions that I've heard a few times when we've been out is, how do you decide between 1.75" and a 2.5? at one of those marginal fires, whether it's a really big house or, a scenario like Jeff mentioned that where you got a taxpayer and then an apartment building above, how do you decide between 1.75 and 2.5? You can't have a rule that's going to cover all of it. But for me, I used to have a kind of a breakdown in my mind was if that fire is about to be in 2 or more places, I would go with the 2.5. Meaning if it's auto exposing the next floor above, or it's auto exposing the eaves, you might want to consider just going with the 2.5, or what we like to say is the 2-inch line now for these kind of jobs, where you need that. If you need that big gun, it's there. What are your thoughts on that?
Right.
That's what we train our guys to. If they see a lot of fire, I mean, it's kind of simple. It's basic. If there's a lot of fire, 2.5. If it's not a residential, we're thinking 2.5 right away. And that doesn't mean we pull up to a strip mall and there's a fire in the back storeroom in this building, and there's no fire greeting us at the street. Yeah, we might pull 1.75 for that, but generally we're thinking for type of building and amount of fire, 2.5.
Mm-hmm. Jeff?
This kind of is interesting because as we are out there and we are pushing the 2-inch with 1.5 couplings, and what we're seeing now is I think people are starting to take note of what we've presented across the country when we go out and show them the 2-inch. And when you consider how many people you have in your engine, experience is a tremendous teacher. It's the best thing we got going for us, truthfully. We'll add the academics later on, but the experience that we have as firefighters, that's number one. And let's never get away from that. I've heard people recently, who said, oh, firefighting is science. That's a bunch of bullshit. We can use science to help us. And we've said that before, but not to fight the fires. Okay. So we do have to have basic understandings of our knowledge, of our principles and things like that. So taking a look at an 1.75 line, it came about to flow more water and not give firefighters a bunch of weight that was unmanageable. And so now here we are many years later, we had guys who were pushing the 2.5, but if you only got 3 guys on an engine and they've never worked with a 2.5, and you don't have a good pump operator who's over pumping and he's whipping these guys all over the place, you know what they're going to do? They're going to abandon that 2.5-inch line. They're going to say, we can't do it. And the fire is going to continue to burn. You're going to lose the building and all that other stuff. And it's because of these hose lines that you're pulling and your manageability and your pump pressures and how you have your nozzle mechanics employed, all that stuff. Even if you got a 4-cylinder engine. So if it doesn't work, it's not going to work. So this is where the understanding of size of hose lines and the systems that you have. So we're out there teaching low pressure, high volume. Go in with overwhelming force and kill it, whatever it is, okay, as best you can. So we found out that 1.75 is good for a couple of rooms, especially in a house or an apartment building, a commercial fire where we can get in there and get a good quick application of water and get a knock on the fire. Yeah, it's not that way on every fire. But now we see the 2-inch coming about and people are starting to pay attention to what we've done, as we said. And if you need a 2.5, you need something on the end of that, low pressure, high volume, or RAM device that allows you to put this thing in position and get big water flowing, kill it. Okay. I was looking at something, this stuff has to be about a week ago. So some guys were talking, and they were talking about the RAM, and honest to God, what are these guys doing? They're splitting hairs. Well, I thought the pressure for the tip on the RAM was 80 PSI. Well, some guys saying pump it at this, and we're going to get this much water. Look, what constitutes a master stream appliance? Anything above 350 gallons a minute if you want to follow what the book says. So if we can get 400, 410, 390 gallons a minute going through a 2.5 with a couple of firefighters on it with a RAM device that allows us to hold our position, you win. People got to understand. Yeah, it's a win. People got to understand that, But every size hose has its limitation. Remember that too.
Jeff,
Yeah.
you want to talk about how many GPMs you were able to get out of a 2-inch?
Yeah. Or you're talking about Diederich.
No, you.
Oh, okay.
Or
Yeah.
Jeff, or
Well,
Jeff,
well,
Jeff one,
actually,
Jeff two. I don't.
you know, as you know, I've been working with the 2.5 for many, many years, you know, several decades. My department went to it years ago, but Jeff and I came to when we reconnected, we were doing a lot of work with the 2-inch,
Right.
and we had variable flows because of the quality of the hose. So as we have seen with the quality and the manufacturing materials of the hose, we're able to get higher flows at reduced friction loss rates.
Mhm.
So we may see, like, for example, at FDIC, back in August, Jeff was up there with the 2-inch off the sandpipe. So we had Pond's particular hose with a 1 1/16 inch solid bore nozzle. And I won't say who it's named after or nicknamed, but I'll have to do that. But I was reading the flow meter that we had set up on the 5th floor because we hooked up on the 5th floor. And if you're familiar with the tower at Wayne Township, that's like 20 feet to a floor. So it's, you know, we're way up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so at one point, that flow meter was reading 270 gallons a minute flowing through that attack line. That's pretty damn good.
So it's capable of way beyond
What you might think.
what you might think. And with that comes with what comes with that, I guess, for me, is you got to respect the line, and you have to know good disciplined nozzle mechanics, because it can be overpressurized yet still used, because that tip is just, in the hose combination, is very forgiving. When you're running it at actually 50 psi, it's around 240 gallons a minute, and it feels like 1 3/4 inches, and it does, but your flows are that much better. So it's a great tool. Yeah. I remember watching every class. We just watch the lights come on, like, really? I'm flowing that much?
Yeah.
Shupe, when we were running Fort Worth, we were doing we had 4 2-inch lines, didn't we? We had Y
Yeah.
on.
We had 4 2-inch lines off the standpipe.
Yeah.
And that, I wish we could have got video of that.
I know it was
Because-
close. We were over 1,000, weren't we?
No, under 1,000.
I mean, it was close. So wasn't it like
Just under 1,000, 4 lines. We had the Y coming off the outlet. I think it was the 4th or 5th floor. So we had 2 lines, 2 150-foot lines of 2-inch going down that one hallway. And then the 3rd engine crew came up, put their Y on the floor above, on the 5th floor, I'm sorry. Whatever floor it was, they hooked up there and they took their line. Then the 4th engine came in with their hose line. So we had 4 2-inch lines. Each one of those was 150 foot in length, 1 1/16 inch tips. And again, the flow meters, you know, having the pressure gauges and the flow meters to verify what we were seeing was just, I was just happy as could be to see what we've been talking about. And again,
I don't think we took the engine up over 150 on that one
oh no,
outside when we were pumping it.
no.
I think one of the great takeaways there too was showing the guys that, and they were in the class, that standpipe system, that pipe in the building, essentially is one gigantic gated Y. And this is why you need to understand how to hold your nozzle as appropriately, because when you're running it, if there's another line running, if the pressure is varying, you need to be able to have a hold on that hose line, whether it's under or over pumped. I mean, we're shooting 450. That's what we're going for. But the reality is you could be getting less or more. So solid nozzle mechanics, good, backup person mechanics. I mean, it all plays in together. And when it's working well, man, it's hard to beat.
Go ahead, Shupe.
No, go on.
I was going to say the 2-inch, Micah, isn't that the one where it's really easy to get lulled into a false sense of security? Like Diederich said, you think it's the 1 3/4. Your grip diameter on the hose, you can get your hand around more of it. It doesn't feel like a whole lot of water, and that's usually the one that we usually have to catch a student at some point, because they'll lose their concentration, lose their mechanics, and that's when they go flying, because it is still a lot of water.
Yeah.
I think we've gotten off onto another, well, we've gotten on a tangent here.
It's a great tangent though, so let's finish it up.
Yeah, but because, when you talk about manageability and weight of hose from the perspective of a dry length, folded into the Denver fold. Oh my gosh, and I've had the 50-foot length or 2-inch hose on my shoulder so many times, and it's like, is this really? Am I missing something here? Because it feels so light. Like you said, it's just a little bit bigger than 2-inch, or excuse me, 1.75-inch hose. So it's like, wow, this is so easy to work with and so forth. So,
I mean, truthfully, if we're using Gladiator is usually 1.88, and so the 2-inch is like 2.02.
yeah.
So
Oh no.
Micah, you typically are helping teach us or teach the other groups the stretching scenario when we're out there teaching. So when it comes to laying out that 2-inch versus the 2.5, you got anything to say as far as stretching out and how the hose behaves and how the students take to it?
No, I mean, we pretty much covered most of it. The highlight of that question would be the coupling size between the 2-inch and 2.5.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to get down to splitting hairs, you can take a scale and weigh the hose. Who really gives a shit? As long as you get the hose off the truck and follow the principles that were taught to us, that we're teaching to them. When it comes to purchasing the 2-inch hose, really consider that 1.75-inch coupling, because that makes a big difference in terms of hose management, as you've seen on the dry stretch.
Right. And that extra large coupling makes no sense for flow as far as we can tell. The
Oh,
inch-
yeah.
Yeah, the 1.5-inch coupling it's got the same waterway that we're looking for, that 1 3/8 waterway. So there's
Oh,
no reason to worry about it.
the light bulbs that come on at our gigs are amazing, especially when Shupe pulls up the the nozzle for the 2.5 versus the nozzle for the 1.75-inch, and you show it's the same waterway, and it's a huge mystery this whole time, and now they finally get to see it firsthand, that, oh my goodness, it's going through the same orifices.
Yep,
1 3/8. Wow, who would have thunk? So,
Who would have thought?
and yeah, but one thing I wanted to mention before we got too far is departments who rely so much on the cross lays. They're comfortable in their cross lays, and they get exposed to other fire departments with more traditions or see more fire, and they get that scratch of stretching from the rear. They need to be cognizant of going back to the department and training them, because what I've seen in departments who are real solely on the cross lays, when they come to that 2-3 a.m. fire and they pull short, or they go up to this whole, hey, I heard from a big city guy, you have to pull past the building. That's what we're going to do from now on. Well, if you're a cross lay department, you pull past the building and you're stretching from a cross lay, I hope you've done your training, because you're going to come up short.
That's right.
So I just want to throw that one out there. And the drivers, if they do pull up short and they've only have pulled off cross lays, and now you have to add another section of hose or 2 sections of hose, that engineer is going to be scratching their head going, carry the 2 minus the 5. How shit, I don't know what the pressure is.
Or they don't know where to add the hose.
Yeah, that's another thing we teach you. And in those troubleshoot moments, how does a driver in the driver compartment have their spare hose rolled up?
Yeah. And where do you put it? And do you have that pigtail from that swivel out of the tray, so you can make that break and make that connection there? I mean, I guess what I could say to anybody who's running pre-connects is have a plan and the tools available to fix that problem where you pull short. That's got to be part. You have to know what your A and B there is to get that done.
Yeah, and that goes back to your question. That's what I've seen from departments from small and big across the country. They just don't get out of their comfort zone. And hopefully if they come hear us and see us, they might be able to take a few things back.
Right. All right, so we kind of covered our bread and butter fires. We talked a little about the larger commercials. One of the things that is out there again across the country are those large garden apartment type complexes, long stretches, and typically what we see is, pick your name for it, but it's usually a 2.5 or 3-inch line with a gated Y on it. And we hear this as our yard stretch. We hear it as some kind of hitch stretch, or like I said, the names are endless, but it's essentially the same. There's a trunk line running way out, and there's a gated Y where they would take their hose and connect to it, whether it's their apartment pack or something that's coiled up and ready to go for that scenario. Just some, look backs. This isn't anything new. There's been really long stretch issues throughout the history of the fire service. I can remember coming up and learning about the Chicago load, where there was a bed of 2.5, a nozzle, and then 1 3/4 screwed on the end of that, which was then horseshoed. So we've been doing this for a long time as a fire service, but where can we get better at it? The long stretch. How about it, Shupe? What do you got?
Well, here again, it depends on the hose beds that you've got. And if your hose beds are limited as to what you can set up, well, then you're limited as to what you can stretch. So, if you take a look at, and Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong on this, a lot of New York City engines, I think they carry like, 300 feet of 1 3/4, and they call it filled out with, 2.5. Allows them to stretch into their apartment buildings and so forth. But not too many cities or rural areas I know are stretching into 6, 7, and 8-story, apartment buildings. So you might get those setback buildings though, or those factories, or those commercial. For example, I live out here in a rural area that's developing, and now we're seeing some small industrial parks. So as you pull into the main driveway, there's a row of commercial buildings and offices going down here. Driving a little bit further, there's another one down there and another one down here and so forth. So that's where a long stretch might come in. First of all, what size line do you think you're going to need back there? So there's again, do you have a bed of that waiting for that not too often fire that comes around once every 5 or 6 or 8 years? Or are your guys trained to take 100 feet of 1 3/4 or 2-inch, hook it on to the end of the 2.5, and make a straight run stretch that way from the engine? So it's one of those things. You have to have a plan and you have to train on it. So.
Hey, Chad, I have a picture of the back of our engine. If you want to give me permission to put it up.
Absolutely. Sorry, I thought
no.
you had that taken care of. You're good to go.
Where am I? So that might give you something to talk about.
Oh, that's pretty.
Yeah.
So on the left side is the portable monitor with, I think that's 3-inch there. Working left to right, there is, I want to say 200 feet of 1 3/4 on top of pretty much unlimited amount of 2.5.
Yep.
Obviously our supply. To the right of that is, I believe they're both 2.5-inch pre-connects. So our thought is we want to get one of these lines into operation quickly and then get a second one to support it. And these flat loads, like Jeff talked about early on, just give you that capability. And it's simple. Even our pre-connects have the horseshoe with just one length, which is actually there's 2 lengths here, but our pre-connects have one horseshoe length. So at least we've got 50 feet of working line. There's 100 feet here on these dead beds. But I think this kind of visualizes everything we've been talking about.
Yeah, that looks nice.
Looks good. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, no, it's flexible. It gives us, we can do our garden apartments, we can do our residential, we can do, our strip malls and stuff with these. And we obviously, like everybody, we've got some churches, we've got some big buildings that, you may need to get a portable monitor in there quick. During the day, we're volunteers, we're short of manpower. So, hey, if you can get a good, get that 3, 4, 500 gallons a minute on that fire with a few guys. We have a large industrial comp with, heavy timber, probably about 1 million square feet when we're done with it. But, if we get that in there, get some good water in the fire, I mean, hell, it's the first step to success,
Yeah, for sure. And that looks like a pretty short bed. I would guess 6, 8 feet.
That's what I'm thinking. That's what I was about to ask Knapp as well.
Yeah, it's short. When this rig was designed, the idea was a lot of water. I think there's 750 gallons on this, which I guess it's good, but we're fully hydronet district. So do we really need 750? We were talking about the emphasis on getting a hose out as opposed to having a semi tanker there.
Diederich, I think you're about to ask him that question. Why? What's your thoughts behind knowing your bed length?
Well, the bed length helps, right? If you know what the folds are, then you can count your hose, what's left in there. And I'm glad you brought it up, Micah. When you're trying to teach somebody how to stretch off a static bed, the question comes, well, how does the pump operator figure for the amount of hose? In the heat of the moment, it's hard to count couplings. Well, in our system, we talk about how the second person grabs that 100-foot coupling as they make their way to the building. So if you can count from that person back, it makes it a little easier. And if you miss that and you understand what's in your bed and how long those folds are, then you know what's there. In Jerry's case, if that's an 8-foot bed, 3 across, let's see, 8 and 8 on one fold, right? So that's 16. So you just do the math across. And then, so one row across is about 50 feet of hose. It's pretty simple. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, he's looking at an easy 200 feet of hose there just by counting the folds. It seems, again, we talked earlier, it just seems too simple to actually work, but that's all there really is to it.
Yeah.
Scary, as we say.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Yeah, really. Yeah, good looking bed. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, I always wonder if I'm scrolling on the social media and somebody has a picture of their new engine, I'm like, showing the front or the side of an engine, it's like showing just the head and shoulders of a bikini model. It's like, come on, let's see the back. It's an engine. Let's see it.
I just want to point out, this is from FDIC 2019 of 141 slides there, Nat.
Woo, that was a long one.
Yeah.
There it
Well, there's a few extras at the end. Believe me. I couldn't talk through all of those.
Something that we've started doing, we have our 2.5 static. I know Shupe's seen it. He's been at my station. I've started bundling 100 feet of 1 3/4. And when it goes, like if we pull 2.5, I go ahead, when I grab the second coupling as the second man, I grab that 100-foot bundle of 1 3/4. That way I just take it with me. And if I need to add on, or if it's not big enough, Jeff, you said, is it a 2.5 or an 1 3/4 fire? Well, it's never going to hurt to have too much water. So yeah, let's just go ahead and knock it down. Then we'll extend off of it and take the more manageable line in. And the cool thing is you don't have to change pressures for that. You can do that without even calling your pump operator.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just a habit we've gotten into.
Right. It makes all the difference. If you got some very basic game plans already pre-figured out, maybe even just named, and you can shout it back to the tailboard and everybody knows what the game plan is for that fire, it just goes that much easier for sure. Yeah.
I've just gotten to where like if I say 2.5, they know I'm bringing 1 3/4 with me. So
you got that, like, is it Velcroed or how's it bundled?
It's 100-foot flat loaded. It's 100-foot. The bundle we make on the side that, we always make when we show how to extend the line, I just Velcroed it together so it's easier to carry.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And it's, 2 50-foot sections Velcroed together, and it lives right next to our 2.5 in the back. That way.
So I was talking earlier about being ready for your first due. And for us, we do have, a couple of apartment areas where the stretch may go beyond the 300 feet or 350 feet of 1 3/4 that we have in the back. what I've always asked my engine drivers to understand is if we're pulling that line and if that last coupling clears the bed and it goes out, get on the 2.5 and pull it to it, and then when we get to where we got to go, you're just going to connect those two, right? Connect it right to the shut off, Velcro the shut off back, and then go back to the engine and break it and connect it. I mean, it's really simple. Just fill it out and get it fixed, and that's it. I mean, when everybody has the same perspective, regardless of the fire, it makes things go a lot easier.
I'm really blessed. I think my longest stretch is 250 feet, and that's at a McMansion. All of ours are apartments, so it's dealing with a different beast.
Well, then let's go vertical now. All right, so now we're going up, and for a lot of places, for us, we would dry stretch, 3rd or 4th floor down. We're gonna hit the standpipe from 4th floor up as a regular. So what are you doing over there?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, after Ice-Ageddon in February, I don't trust any of our sprinkler systems that well anymore. Everything broke last February, and they broke again 2 weeks ago.
There you go.
But so anything under 5 stories, and guys, I give you and Shupe all the credit for this, because y'all taught me this, and I just kind of evolved it. You have to know. Someone said firefighting is geographical, circumstantial, and local. This is where that local comes in. You have to know your district. Most of my fires, my apartment buildings, like in Addison Circle, they're 20 feet away from the road. Now, they're huge and they're long. They're monstrous. You'd have no idea. You're lucky and we get there so quick, you're lucky if you can look up on the map, find out where the standpipe is. So you have to do a lot of walking. The easiest way I found this, and these aren't big fires. They're small fires that you just got to get to quick. So instead of waiting and hoping that somebody can find the FDC where to pump into, because it could be a half mile away, and waiting for that standpipe to fill to where we can get it and we're bleeding off air, we just started using the rope drop. And so I'll take a water can. Diederich, you showed me a new way to keep my rope on my water can. I carry a 50-foot rope on my water can with 2 carabiners on it. And so as long as I have clean hallways, and this also gets into, is your truck company doing truck company stuff and searching out the fire before you? I just scoot up there. As long as I have a clean hallway, I tell my driver, hey, the fire's coming out of that window, pull past it, start looking for a rope. If I have a clean hallway, I'm going to go about 2 apartments down from where that is, and I'm going to go in their apartment, come out their window, and drop my rope down to my driver. And I'm going to pull. Sometimes it's off the back. If I'm under 5 stories, my 200-foot crosslay will get me there. I'm 20 feet away, 30 feet up. There's 50 to get me through that next apartment and into the hallway, and then I still have 100 feet of hose.
That's an important point. That's an important point for departments that are strung up with crosslays. You can get to a 5th floor fire pretty efficiently if you know how to use it.
Usually takes us about 3 minutes to get it going, and that's me booking it up the stairs. But with the new, so what Diederich did was he showed me, what we take a water can, because if you get off an engine, you've got to have water. Whether it's a water can or a hose, you have to have water. You open that door, see how big the fire is. If it's a huge fire, shut the door and run. Go to the standpipe. If it's going to be more than 1 3/4, but if it's something that a water can, knock it down, isolate it, come back two doors down. A lot of our apartments have openings that are naturally there anyway. We just chunk that rope down. My driver takes the hose, puts it at the bottom. He just clips the nozzle in, and I pull it up pretty quick. And we've gotten really lucky with it and really good with it. And most of our buildings are 5-story. Now, anything over 5, I have to go to standpipe, and that's where I get into the 2-inch. But it's worked really well for us. If it's a center core apartment, because you have apartments on both sides, if it's clean, if it's on the interior, you just go to the exterior and go through that window.
Yeah, you just got to know your district, know your buildings, and understand how you're going to get the hose up to that window.
And make sure you tell the people to leave the room that you just broke into, because you're going to be pulling a hose through there.
Right. So there's that.
Yeah.
But we've learned from history that external stretches have been going on forever. We've seen urban departments pulling them up fire escapes. We've seen people using various hand tools like hooks We've even seen people, doing lines over ladders, all these other different ways of getting a tailboarder from, the street to the fire. So if we could hit the lines over ladder real quick, Jeff, you want to walk us through?
Yeah, first of all, we'll talk about ground ladders. And that is, not too often do you take a hose line up a ground ladder. Not too often, I said. Most of the time you're looking for the interior stairwell, if you can use that. But when it comes to taking lines of a ladder, very simple. It's the best way to take it up is dry, because obviously you don't have a charged line in your hand. And if you're going to get a charged line and try to climb up a ladder, you got to have your free hand slide the underside of the beam while you're trying to hold the nozzle. Well, think about that. If that line is charged and it's 1 3/4, you got 53 pounds of water weight. You're trying to pull that much with your other hand up the ladder. If you don't have another firefighter there to help you, let alone butt the ladder, it's a very hard, time consuming and laborious thing to do. And you can also get pulled off the ladder. I don't think it hasn't happened, because it has happened. But if you got a dry line, very simple. You're gonna have your tank on, and maybe not your face piece on, but you have your tank in your back. But if you're the guy with the nozzle, take the nozzle, bring it up one side. Doesn't matter what side you're taking your hose up. Some people say if the ladder's positioned on this side of the window, then take it up on this side. So when you step off the ladder into the window, the hose will come up into the window with you. Good thought. Whatever you do, whatever side the hose is coming up while you are climbing the ladder, take the nozzle and throw it over your other shoulder and let it go a little bit right about the base of your tank. That frees your hands up to have more control as you're climbing the ladder. Always have the bail closed, because you get somebody who accidentally charges that line from the pump, you're in trouble. That thing comes over, whips, knocks you off that ladder or something like that. And this is, one of the things you have to remember also. So how high you go up with a hose on a ladder, obviously second floor would be one of those areas that you go. Third floor, that's a stretch, I'm telling you, and once you start getting up that high with that hose, again, that's where you have to have help getting it up that ladder. So
Sure.
So
What is some of the gives and takes about going over an aerial device into a?
Jerry and I have talked about it, and this is East Coast to West Coast. It's just kind of interesting, the different areas of thought. I wanted to put on a clip tonight, and again, going back to the 80s, not the fire I showed you guys earlier, but this was back in that time. And an aerial ladder was positioned, and the guys were taking a 2-inch line at that time up the ladder to try to get in this joint. This joint was roaring. And of course, this place took off like a Roman candle, and the guys are backing that line down the ladder and getting singed in the process. So it was great footage. I would love to put it on tonight, but I don't have it up here for you guys. But using an aerial ladder to some places, I guess, is taboo, but to other places, it works. And if the ladder is not being used for rescue or evacuation or anything like that, then you use it for firefighting. And this is one of the things of firefighting, if you have to get an aerial ladder to get your guys into different parts of the building. Now, one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting is the way they used to position ladders, aerial ladders, like in your multi-story buildings, and when they would spot across windows. So the turntables here, and let's just say we have the wall of the building along here, they would try to shoot the stick right up alongside the building, so you could access a window here, and as the ladder went up, you could access a window there. And it gave you immediate access to take a line up that ladder, or egress or access at another point on the ladder. And that's son of a gun. Those are the old things that the old guys, experienced and pushed on to us. So like I said, when I hear, some places that, oh, we would never do that. Well, other places, they would do that or have done that. So,
So you'd put that turntable at the corner of the building and then lay the stick near the building.
yeah,
So
right
if
alongside the wall.
you ascend the ladder, you climb over the side of the ladder into a window.
Right, right.
You know,
And
I'm
there's-
surprised at our class. We do this every time. I'm surprised how many firefighters have never climbed a ladder with hose. They always say it's the first time.
I will say it is sad in the American Fire Service right now. The training manuals are anywhere from 1,300 to 1,700 pages. The schools are 16 to 22 weeks long. And when you hear that said, that they were never shown that or never done that, we're failing. What are you going to do with a real fire when you have to do something like that? Nobody's going to think of it. That's the point.
Right,
Nobody's going to be thinking.
just let the building burn at that point. They're not gonna,
Yeah.
it's not gonna be in their,
Right.
it's not in their experience bank. They're not even gonna think about it.
No. Not in the instructor's experience bank either.
Yeah.
Mm.
So,
There was a really big fire in our area up in Lorraine County, like last year, I think it was. And looking at the pictures, it was just great to see. I mean, there was 2.5s playing from across the alley. There was lines up ladders. There was this big industrial building going, and I mean, they had lines from every which way going into it. It was nice to see for a change. Like, oh, okay, big fire didn't scare anybody away. They were going after it. So
yeah.
it's still out there. It's just a matter of perspective, and people getting after it or not.
Yeah.
All right. So as a tailboard firefighter looking at a fire and stretching, we got some basics here. One is if your engine's set up to fight fire, you're in a good spot. If it's not, if you're into pre-connects, and this is by no means a dig on your departments that are pre-connected, but you have to understand what your limitations are and what they're for, and how to get around those limitations when you need to. But if you're going to work off the back of an engine, your life gets a lot easier as far as a flat load goes, and going long or going short doesn't really matter. What else are we missing here? We've covered going vertical with the rope, ladders, aerial device. We got residential and commercials done. Jerry?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of it, but I think it goes back to earlier what Jeff was saying. The mission of an engine company is to get water on the fire. And why is that? It's to protect our guys that are doing a search that may be in ahead of us, or certainly, crawling right up behind us, and obviously to protect the civilians. So, and I think Jeff alluded to it, we're getting so diluted by the different things, the EMS, the hazmat, confined space, all that stuff. And that's great. We got to do that, but we can't forget if the most important thing is to get water in a fire for the safety of the civilians who are sworn to protect, and the safety of our members. We just got to remember the mission, and everything that we do and design engines and train and whatever else it might be. Like Chad's thinking out of the box with the rope drop. We just you gotta be obsessed with that if you're an engine guy.
Yeah, that makes sense. You think about what you have done and what you may do, and build the engine around it.
Yeah, and your whole training program and the whole deal.
And what do you do when something goes wrong? When your plan doesn't work? How fast is your backup plan?
Yeah, exactly. Or you're stretching the first line, you get that in service. Is there a backup line coming? When things go bad. Yeah, good point, Chad. Real
Not
good
backup
point.
line, second line.
Second line. There you go.
Backup line means it failed.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yep.
Right.
Somebody
And
with whiter hair may have said that before.
It's interesting because, going back to what we're seeing in so many places now about how fire attack is handled, the transitional stuff. We see this happening, and unfortunately, to me, it's having a negative impact on aggressive firefighting. Here we are talking about stretching the different size hose lines, the flows that are anticipated, and being aggressive with the line, but the mentality or the mindset, if we're not aggressive here mentally, then we can't be aggressive or won't be aggressive with the hose lines. When you are, told, oh, you got to hit it from here to get in on it. That's a bunch of crap. I know the older firefighters said you will be inside. And if anything goes wrong and we have to withdraw, we'll be inside as soon as we can afterwards, after we get things back under control. So when you see something like that, the younger generation, that's a mindset that is in them already. So as
Yeah.
an older firefighter talks, it's just, no, we should be aggressive and offensive until we can't be. And they have a rough time understanding that, like we said, the training books are or the training for many of these basic training programs throughout the country, anywhere from 15 to 22 weeks long, and they're hardly hitting on firefighting or the basic fires that they're fighting, because you can't do acquired structures. Like, get somebody hurt? Oh my God. Well, they're putting that fear into these new people's minds. Yeah, hey, it's part of the job. And if something happens, something happens. But, one of the ways of preventing that from happening, I think, is by going after it and killing the incident, putting it out. Who said that, Jer? Oh my God. So
I would agree. And training is how you reduce the risk. I mean, nobody ever said that the Marines were not ready for war when they left Parris Island, right?
yeah,
I mean, training is how you do it. You got to just get ready for it and then go after it.
yeah.
I have a very young crew. Like I said, I think my senior guy has maybe 8 years, and all the rest are 3 and under. And from day one, I say, if there is a fire, we are absolutely we are going in. No questions asked unless I pull you out or somebody pulls me out. But don't even ask, are we going in? It's going. We're going. If I hear something otherwise, we'll stop. But
Is our West Coast friends say Eddie would go?
yeah.
Eddie would go.
But you almost have to tell the new guys that, because they're waiting to find out, are we going to hit it from outside? Or I go, no. If you see it, yes. Yeah, if you're waiting on me, spray it while you're waiting on me. But we're going to the front door. We're going inside quickly.
Right. That's it.
We have enough water. You have good mechanics. Let's go.
Get it done. All right, so let's round this up. Micah, any takeaways from tonight?
The one note I made was, even though this is not a rig committee podcast or webcast, you get the opportunity to be on the rig committee, do it with a full heart of knowing the difference between a war wagon and a parade wagon. And don't let the chiefs, everyone on the committee, set aside your ego and make the thing a efficient piece of equipment. That's every time I hear a chief say, well, we can't do that because of ISO, we can't do that because of NFPA. What's the job? What's it meant for? Is it for a parade?
Usually when the NFPA comes up, I go, well, NFPA says we're supposed to have 4 on an engine. We don't follow that one. Why do we pick and choose?
Be careful, you call a chief out. You might not find yourself on that committee.
That's usually how it goes. All right, you are no longer invited. Jerry.
Just think of the mission of the engine company. The best thing we can do is get water on the fire, decisive amounts of water on the fire quickly. If we're doing that, we're successful. We're doing the right thing.
Yeah, agreed. Chad, a tailboard firefighter going from the engine to the drop point. Anything left here?
You know what? It doesn't matter what you use. If you're using static loads, if you're using cross blades, the most important thing is knowing their capabilities and what their limits are and being able to use them efficiently. And one of the things I tell my guys, hey, if it looks like shit, it's going to pull like shit. So if we come in and it doesn't look good, when you're checking that engine out, it's your hose load. Make sure it's right. And I love it when my 3C says, hey, this looks like crap. Let's pull it and get it to where we can do it. All right.
I like it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because I was looking to say something about that earlier. I think it was take one, first take. where what came up, I was going to say, it goes back to what we talked about in a previous episode where we said, roll call in the morning, apparatus floor, everybody get on the engine and go over your turnout gear, your SCBA, then go over the whole apparatus, but especially the hose beds, together as a team.
Yeah, that does it.
Yeah.
Make sure
I
you're
mean,
ready.
Volunteers, being a volunteer operation, before you leave the firehouse. Okay, if you're not training on engine operations that night or whatever, have everybody go over the hose bed just one time. Take a look at it. This is how it pulls. This is how we're going to pack it back every time, guys. Officers got that. Firefighters got that. Good. This is our engine. This is how we're going to use it. So forth. Something simple like that to get it into people's, mental process.
We've even got our cross lay set up because it's 200-foot stacks, and you can, there it's bundled together. The 100-foot, the working length is bundled together, but we'll be able to pull it from both sides and make sure it can slide quickly, so you don't get hung up on a coupling, Jerry.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't slide, let's pull it and let's get rid of it and let's make it to where it does slide, where we can get it out from either side.
I think that's been named already. It's a bi-directional cross lay, Chad.
Oh.
I don't know if you,
God,
let's not digress.
Are you becoming
All
woke?
right. I'm going woke on it. All right, so we've covered quite a bit here. We've talked a lot about just getting lines off the engine and what it takes from the start to beginning. We're interested to hear back from you guys. If you'd like to shoot us an email, you can get us at strategicfiretraining at gmail.com. We're happy to talk to you there or on the Facebook page. But thanks for tuning in. Fellas, this is a good discussion. Thanks a lot for adding in.
man.
Hey, it's not too far away. FDIC, and we'll all be there.
Sign up, take our class.
Yeah, 2022. Here we go. We
That's
are
a
in
fun one.
January.
Yep. Okay.
Everybody,
All right,
all
all.
be safe.
Yeah, have a good night. Cheers.